listeners. Welcome to yet another episode of the Startup Catalyst. This is a special initiative started by GRG Gen X Incubator. That's the latest incubator in town of Coimbatore. And we started this initiative of the podcast to get our mentors onto the platform so that the incubatees and the startup ecosystem can get to know the kind of wonderful mentors we have on board and what's the skill and expertise that they bring to the table. Today I'm very pleased to welcome Shekhar. Shekhar is a seasoned veteran in the industry. He spent 30 plus years in the industry as a founder, as a corporate veteran, as a CFO, as a mentor, angel investor, and he's had a diverse experience which I'll let Shekhar complete. Welcome, Shekhar.
Thank you so much, Hetal. What a privilege, to be part of this GRG Gen X initiative, and that too from Coimbatore. Hats off. Hetal, this is so amazing. So thank you for that brief intro, but let me just add on, you said I'm an old guy, so thank you for saying that, which means, my professional journey started, quite some time back. You're right. It's almost more than 2 decades now.
Old is gold.
Yeah, when you started saying that, I'm just reminded, my basic qualification is finance and accounting. So I'm a Pakka chartered accountant, cost accountant, also did my company secretary, did few other, professional qualifications, both in finance and management area. So that's how, I started my journey in terms of finance and accounting area. Started with ExxonMobil and then moved from there to KPMG because of the US GAAP fascination. And my last stint was with a UK-based multinational. It's called Lornamead Group. And Hetal, I spent almost close to 10 years with them. So, a lot of youngsters these days, they don't stay with their organizations. But trust me, when you stay with an organization for longer, your ability to understand, what you're doing becomes much more phenomenal. That's exactly what happened to me. This 10 years helped me, to do M&A for them, do a fundraise for them, do restructuring, refinancing, ensure that there was proper corporate governance, because we live in an age, where financial reporting, corporate governance is very, very important. But I'll tell you what, where I had my phenomenal experience there. I was dealing with best of the investment bankers, the venture capital firms, the private equity guys, the hedge funds, but more importantly, even law firms. So that gave me the confidence to do 11 acquisitions, 4 divestments, doing a lot of fundraise and restructuring. And the last thing I did was selling that group to Lee & Fung, which is a $25 billion Hong Kong-based group. So all this experience is what, sort of gave me the confidence, that I can become an entrepreneur. Because as this transaction was happening, somewhere this entrepreneurial bug bit me. So I thought, that once this transaction gets over, I should be on my own. And that's how my journey started with ANOVA. ANOVA was effectively born in June 2013. So ANOVA is a advisory firm with a lot more focus on mergers and acquisition as well as fundraise. So in ANOVA, we also do business valuation, we do due diligence, we are in the business of helping on the preparation of the business plan. In a very niche basis, we also do strategic CFO services. So some of the market transactions that we have done in ANOVA include, we sold a business called Nova Scotia to Oyo Rooms. We sold a business, Helicor, which was our client, to Megadyne, which is an Italian multinational in the auto component space. And the recent transaction, Hetal, we did was selling our client Vibgeo to Nippon Paints. And trust me, all these things that you do on M&A, every M&A is a new experience. And that's what, led me, even to feel, that the entrepreneurial journey is always fascinating. But then I think one important question is, what made me come to the world of startup then? Because in your introduction, you also said, no, I'm an angel investor, I've done investments, I'm mentoring. I'll tell you what, I became an angel investor 6 years back. And effectively, 6 years back, my greater investments happened in the last 4 years, which also included the COVID year.
Yeah.
And probably I became mad, mad in the sense, I always say that angel investment is addictive. So you got to be careful, as you, evaluate each opportunity. But trust me, I personally felt that if you are an angel investor, the greater chance for one to be part of a startup is when the startup is at an early stage. Mm-hmm. Because if the startup is growing, probably you may not get the ticket size that you want, or you may not get the valuation that you want.
Yeah.
And second is, because I come from certain background, I was true to the word angel. What I mean by that is, how do I support the startups?
Yeah.
I always used to make the statement that you should put the money where the mouth is. Yeah. Which means don't just call yourself an angel because you want to make an investment. Can you really support given the experience and background that you carry?
Yeah.
So whenever I used to evaluate, I used to tell myself that there is risk, but then where there is no risk, there is no reward. So that's a given.
Yeah.
That is how I started involving myself more with the startup world. I've invested in more than 50 startups. I've invested in almost 7 funds. So as I was doing this investment, pre and post sort of investment, I started engaging myself with the startup. Just to give you certain areas where I engage with them, I engage in terms of validating their idea as well as helping them on their business model, because I always believe that business model is more important than the idea.
Yeah.
And that's why the word pivot is very, very important in the world of startup. Review their pitch deck, help them to understand even their financial plan, go through their valuation to ensure that it makes sense. But more importantly, not just invest, probably connect them to other investors also, or maybe help them even in their next fundraise. But I also run through their term sheets or agreements to help them understand what does a subscription and shareholder agreement mean, what clauses they represent, what is a compulsory convertible debenture agreement, what is a compulsory convertible preference share agreement. So I think what I did was got much more connected with them. I'd also ensure that I was able to help them with certain customers as I went through this journey. So this is how my engagement started evolving with them, Hetal.
Right. No, wonderful. It's a pleasure to hear so much in detail about your experience. And three things which I picked up. First is, of course, your finance background, as I was mentioning to before the call, right? Finance is one area where typically entrepreneurs lack clear expertise, and finance or ability to understand numbers from a startup perspective is becoming more and more important, because now it's not just growth versus profitability. It's corporate governance, and governance is all about how clean your books are, right? The second aspect which I caught on is your skills in M&A, right? And I've been an angel investor like you. I've spent 10 plus years now. And I realized that whenever we used to make an investment bet, we used to typically consider the challenge with regard to exit, right? Okay, I'm entering right now, when I'm going to get the exit. And typically there used to be only two scenarios, right? One is when a VC comes in and he buys my stake. And if he comes in at a stage where it's very expensive for him to buy my shares, he will say no to it, and then I'm stuck till the eventual exit. And eventual exit typically are IPOs nowadays, or a complete buyout, right? And a complete buyout at a stage of an IPO becomes extremely difficult, because no private entity would probably want to shell out 400-500 crores or whatever, right, to buy you out. So somewhere in between, right, somewhere in where the VCs have exhausted their appetite to invest more and you reach an IPO stage, comes an M&A stage. And that's a beautiful opportunity that you're bringing on board in terms of giving that as an alternative option. And I like the way you orchestrated your own angel investment experience and the kind of areas that you support startups in. I think the incubators at GRG Gen Next and even the listeners would really value that a lot. Because I always whenever it comes to my angel investment journey, I typically cite the example of Arjuna and Krishna, and I tell them, look, I am Krishna, you can either have my army and me, or me, and invariably the entrepreneurs who are the Arjunas are more than happy to select me, which is my time and my experience, because money nowadays, if you're a good startup, there are many different sources for money, but there will still very few limited sources where people are willing to spend time with you, run through your entire deck, correct the spelling mistakes, ask you to make the corrections without getting angry, and go back to the entire deck all over again and give you more experience and expertise, right? So I think the pretty critical aspect as well. Since you have a lot of experience engaging, I'm sure you have a own perspective on the startup ecosystem. Would love to share what are the market trends that you're observing, what are the key observations that you made, and what is your punt, right? I mean, what do you see the startup industry in the next 3 to 5 years?
Hetal, as an angel investor, I'm sector agnostic, but because I also run a fund, the fund is very sector focused. We invest only in technology startups, consumer startups, and then mobility startups. By mobility startups, what I mean is electric vehicle, drones, and then space technology. But then you asked me about the new trends, and yes, let me share some of the new trends that I am sort of focusing on. There are three basically, and I'll go by the order of my preference. The first trend that I'm looking at is sustainable and purpose-driven startups. Now, what I mean by sustainable, I think there is a growing demand across the geographies in terms of sustainable as well as socially responsible startups. For example, our latest investment is going to be in a business called Fitsol. fits all, is in the space, of the sustainability, okay, what we call as climate tech. And this area is very, very closer to me because I think that consumers as well as investors, they are increasingly prioritizing their business along these ESG lines, the environmental, the social, and the governance aspects. In fact, I personally, feel that startups should embed this sustainability into their DNA. It just can't be a statement. For example, my request to the startup is that it should not be a marketing strategy. A lot of people use ESG, sustainability, loose words as marketing, strategy. My request to them is don't use it as a marketing strategy, use it as a fundamental business model. So that's what, when I look at this segment, I want to look at sustainability and purpose-driven startup. This is a beautiful purpose when we speak about sustainability. What are we talking about? We are talking about eco-friendly products. We are talking about ethical supply chain. We are talking about transparent practices. You said in the beginning how corporate governance is so important. And I think startups who integrate the sustainability into their core values, the DNA, which I said, they are not only meeting the consumer demand, but trust me, they will get better investors. So I think the world of investors would also, come, behind them. Just to give you a couple of examples, I'm from Chennai. There's a startup called ProClean, and ProClean is in the business of biodegradable and non-toxic green chemical. It started, as early as 2012, and trust me, it is one of the most watched startup. Just to give you another example, there's a startup called Biko, and Biko is a Mumbai-based startup, and this startup, does the common thing that we know of, the tissue paper, the reusable towels, which we all understand. But then, because it is all doing in a sustainable way, it is surprising to know that celebrities like Diya Mirza, Amir Khan have also invested in the business. What I'm saying is that I think sustainability is no longer about doing less harm. I think sustainability is all about doing more good. Yeah. If that is part of the DNA, then I think, it will be very, very fascinating. That's my first, very closer to my heart. The second, I've always said this, we need to look at AI and ML integration into startup. Now, what I mean by AI and ML integration, if you just go into today's startup world, everybody says I use AI. But where I want them to tell us how this AI or ML works is it their real unique value proposition? It just can't be, it is also there. It can't be, that AI is also there. Can that be a real unique value proposition? What I mean by this, can that AI solve some real world business problems? Can that AI improve the decision making? Can that AI offer even personalized, customer experiences? I'll give you an example. We are working with a company called Voxel. It's very, very early, but these guys are in something called Gen AI. But look at within the Gen AI what they're doing. They are into sentiment prediction of the customer. For example, the customer feedback or the customer, sort of testimonial is very, very important for the growth of any business. And you understand the sentiment. Is it good or bad? That level, the AI is able to, depict what's happening in the minds of the consumer. Second is the conversational AI. Today, I think the vernacular language is becoming very, very important, and the AI can interpret it in the right way. I think that will help more consumers, to latch on to that business or the startup. So what I'm trying to tell you broadly in AI ML is that most of the startups I've seen are the narrow AI users. What is narrow AI users? It is there, but it can't learn independently. What I'm requesting the startups to do is, can they move from that narrow AI into something called artificial general intelligence, which means at least they are learning something similar to the humans. But the best part, which I'm still looking for, and I think it's evolving, is to look for startups which are into artificial super intelligence, which means it exactly knows the capabilities of human. And I think if I look at Industry 4.0, some of the startups, which I even see from Coimbatore, I think there's a lot of effort that is happening to make the, the whole machine much more smarter so that it mimics the human. That's where I think, I'm looking for startups. So that's my second. I'm going to move on to my third, which is very closer to my heart. I'm looking for health and wellness startups which are using digital medium in a larger way, which means I'm speaking about digital health and wellness. What I mean by that, I think in today's world, I think we are much more comfortable, when we have this convenience, accessibility, because of personalization reasons. I don't think we are very comfortable explaining, what we are going through, when it is an offline medium. But when it is, more of an online medium, and because the product comes to your home delivered also, I think we're becoming much more comfortable. What I'm trying to explain is that look at mental wellness as one area. We invested in a business called Listen. It's based out of Bangalore. And Listen is doing a fabulous job, in the online, the digital way of, creating the mental wellness, because I think the stress and the pressure that the Gen Z, and the millennials go through is unbelievable. And therefore, this digital health and wellness is very, very important. What I mean by that is your telemedicine, your fitness tech, all this, or something, that if they can evolve better, would be a very great attraction for investors. What I'm trying to say is that wellness should be a complete integration of body, mind, and the spirit. If that startup, is getting into their system, then I think it will be a very interesting area for investors. So therefore, to capitalize on all these trends, Hetal, what I believe is that one needs to be agile, one needs to be adaptable, one needs to be ready to pivot. Because there are these offerings, sustainability, there is AI/ML, there is, health and wellness. But how do you pivot, when the moment comes? More importantly, how do you focus on giving the real value? How do you solve the customer problem? So sorry. And what is even more important, Hetal, is, we have to embrace that technology in such a way that innovation is at core. That should be the central part. I don't want to speak about AI/ML without, even dwelling on the fact that it has to be, highly innovative. And lastly, as I said, one has to prioritize the sustainability, the word called inclusivity, the word called social responsibility. It has to be part and parcel, the DNA, and not just, marketing jargons.
Got it. No, I think very well summarized. All the three spaces that you mentioned, which is sustainability, AI/ML, and finally health and wellness, are very critical areas. And it's interesting bit that you mentioned about simple AI versus complex aspects of AI, which is artificial general intelligence, or how do you get machines to mimic as much as humans. On that point, obviously there's a lot of debate going around in terms of impact of jobs and how AI is actually going to have a huge impact on the nature and the quantity of jobs that will be available. So what's your take on it? I mean, is AI beneficial for the job industry, or it's actually going to be detrimental?
So when I say mimic the humans, Hetal, what I'm trying to convey is that if there are routine, regular, common, task, can that be mimicked, by a bot or a robot, That's where we are coming to. Because when we speak about artificial intelligence, what we are trying to say is that the human potential is unbelievable. It's limitless. See, if you push me to the next level, that's when you're going to see me how much, I can even evolve. A human mind is a limitless potential. Unfortunately, we are curtailing ourselves. We create limitations in ourselves because we are not giving out our best. I'm so thankful to the world of AI and ML because it is doing some of the routine tasks, mundane tasks, and it is making us think, what should I do? And I think it is pushing you to the next level. If you ask me, I don't think AI and ML is leading to job losses. It is making people better. The problem is, do people want to become better? Because one of the big concern I have with the young minds is that they are always looking for instant gratification, even without putting in the hard effort that is required. In my sort of generation, probably I can use your generation too. Our whole thought process was, how can I become better? How can I become a better version of myself? Trust me, this technology is pushing us towards that level. I think with technology, we are becoming much more better in terms of how we can apply our intelligence better. And therefore, my request is, if we are speaking about the mundane jobs, the ordinary jobs, you are absolutely right. The AI/ML, is going to be a dampener there. But what about the human potential? Is the whole idea of even giving education or imparting knowledge not to create the best? When we say we are a mentor, are we not trying to call out the best out of the startup guys? I think that should evolve across. There are certain jobs which still can be done by humans as a mutant repetitive, but I think technology is showing us what is our capability, and therefore can we push the limits.
Yeah. No, I think you summarized it really well, and I think I'd read this somewhere. It talked about I want AI to do my laundry, do my dishes, and cook my food, so that I can spend time on real stuff and not spend time on doing my laundry and me doing my dishes so that someone else is doing the real stuff, right? And I think that's where people need to take that sole decision. Am I doing something which really, utilizes my skills to the maximum? And if it's not, then I should stop doing that and do something which will really require my skill and pass on that task to someone else, right? I mean, the whole debate about should we make a meal or should we order from Swiggy or Zomato? Obviously, the old age people will say, no, you should make ghar ka khana and, homely
Exactly.
cooked food and all. But if I can
Exactly.
actually get really good quality food, simple, it's not hurting my tummy in any way, it's not pinching my pocket anyway, I'm better off rather than spending that hour, 2 hours preparing the meal, doing the dishes and laying out the table and sitting at and eating it out, right? So I think that's a judicious call which people need to make at their individual level. And if each individual starts taking those judicious calls, we as a society will prosper a lot, because all of us will start focusing on stuff which really requires human intervention rather than something which a machine could have anyway done the same task as well.
Exactly. Exactly.
The other aspect is in terms of challenges. So you obviously have had very close interaction with startups at different levels. Would you list out 3 or 4 common challenges that you've observed in startups today?
I think the first, I would speak about differentiation, because in our fund also we look for that as our first criteria. What I mean by differentiation is that the startup land is very, very competitive, because you already have the behemoths, the elephants, the big corporates, who are already there, and probably, if they decide, to do that, they can do it. So if a startup is going to be disruptive, they cannot settle for mediocrity. What I mean is that, they have to be much more passionate in terms of, how they are bringing about the differentiation. What I mean by this is, I've always, said that whenever I want to invest, for me, the first is the founder market fit. How comfortable I am with the founder, and therefore do I believe that this founder and the market, there is a fitment. See, we always say that we bet on the jockey, not on the horse, which means the founder is so important to us. The second aspect I always say is that, is the problem solution fit a great fit? Which means, has the founder understood that there is a real problem, and therefore the solution that is going to be offered is going to create the magic. Now, when I speak about problem, I always say that a problem well defined is a problem half solved. Have they spent enough time even to understand that the problem, is so well understood so that the solution makes sense? I don't want startups to feel that, their solution is great because they have, come up with that product. There's a beautiful statement, of Steve Blank, who says that startups do not fail because they don't build products. Startups fail because they don't find consumers. So I think for me, whenever I speak about the founder market fit, the problem solution fit, what I want the startups to realize is that if the problem is popular, if the problem is urgent, if the problem is expensive, if the problem is mandatory, if the problem is growing, trust me, you have a large market to handle. Agar wo chota hai, it's a very, very small aspect. It doesn't help at all. Therefore, the founder market, the problem solution fit are very important. But for differentiation, ultimately you have to come to something called the product market fit. So what is product market fit? We always say that product market fit, it actually happens when you're building the right product to solve the customer needs. The main essence of product market is, are you solving the customer problems? Is the needs being fulfilled? That's why I always tell the startups that figure out what you want to build even before you build it. But many of the startups, unfortunately, they spend all their energy in building it and not even realizing whether it is differentiated. So my first challenge, which I want, to truly understand is there a differentiation? I move to my second point, and second point is very, very important in today's startup world, securing money or securing finance. I think there are very few startups, who have that ability in terms of, getting the money from friends and family, or even use the word bootstrap. Many of the startups can't, which means securing money is one of the essence of even building the startup. Now, what I mean by securing the money, I think securing the money is the starter telling the investor a compelling narrative of what their business is. It has to be compelling. The story has to be fascinating, believable. The second aspect is, are they clearly articulating the problem? Because as I said, a problem well defined is a problem half solved. Is that problem clearly understood by the startup so that they are able to explain to the investor what is the market opportunity and how well the team is uniquely positioned to solve it? That's very, very important when it comes to this word called securing funding. Thirdly, investors always looking, for how well, the startup is building relationship, not just, with their internal team members, but also with the customers, with the vendors. I think sometimes, securing money is a factor of not just the founder and the team, but more importantly, the external, sort of ecosystem, which is your customer and your vendors. What I'm trying to tell you is that a passion plus a clear vision, or trust me, can help secure the funding. Most of the time, when we are funding, we are looking for these qualities. And I think that's the next challenge, I want to highlight saying that securing money is very important.
Got it.
I'll come
I
to
think
the
that's
third one.
yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. No, please go ahead. Continue.
I'll come to the third one, and third one is very closer to probably, all of us. Can they build a strong team? Now, why is it a challenge? I'll tell you, Hetal. I've seen a lot of startups, where there are founders, co-founders. They have the domain knowledge. But where I get concerned is there is no cohesiveness. What is cohesiveness? Sometimes, when they present to us, I want to even see, in terms of whether they are presenting as a team or is it a one-man show. One of the risks that we always see is that if someone is a one-man show, it only means that the person either thinks the communication style is better or the person thinks the person, knows everything, in that system, which is actually not fascinating for investors. So one of the challenge, that I see in a startup world is, are they building a strong team in terms of not only, having the domain expertise, but also showing how cohesive they are, how effective they are. What I mean by this is, it's not about just finding the right talent. It's about, even understanding that when it matters the most, are they able to go together in terms of even, achieving those greater heights? That is what is important to them. See, I read a statement somewhere, Hetal, and it was very, very closer to my heart. The statement goes like this: we don't build a business. We build a team. And the team builds the business. I think if, the startup founders are able to explain to us how well they are focused in terms of ensuring that they have quality people, cohesive people, a team which is stronger, I think, that gives, excellent credentials to us, even to invest in them. I'll go to the next one because you said this in the beginning.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of this word called regulatory and compliances. For me, if the startup is showing that they have done their basics right, could be PF, ESI, could be gratuity, could be your TDS, could be your GST, or could be whatever is that compliance. I want to ensure that there is an environment where these guys truly understand and appreciate that you need to follow the law, abiding by the law. There can be delays, there can be mistakes or errors. So long it is correctable, I'm fine with them. What I'm saying is that ignorance of law is not a blessing, as far as I go. I want to ensure that these guys understand the importance of regulation. Why am I saying this? Only when you understand the business and the regulations, you can manage the cash flow very well. In the beginning, Hetal, you also mentioned about profitability, sustainable businesses, right? I always say that sales is vanity, profit is sanity, but cash flow is reality. If the startup, the business does not have a focus on the cash flow, if their eyes are not focusing on the cash flow, or trust me, the sustenance becomes a big issue. So these are some of the challenges I see in the startup as we are evaluating them.
Yeah. No, wonderful summary of the specific challenges, and of course, the list can go on and on. But I think it's good that you narrowed down and specified a few of them, which are critical as well. Would you elaborate a bit on a few of the success stories from your own investment, some startup that you'd like to talk about?
Sure. There is one particular startup I want to talk about. Okay, it's a startup which is in the healthcare space. And when it started the journey, it was very, very interesting because this startup had this bold vision. And the bold vision was to say that they are going to revolutionize the medical diagnostics industry. Now, diagnostics is not a very, small word because there are giants, who are in the world of diagnostics. But then when they had this bold vision, first of all, that caught my attention. Because what they were trying to tell me is that they will come up with innovative, at the same time, cost-effective product. That caught my attention first. And then when I was, dwelling deeper into what they're doing, it was very, very interesting. They were offering a smartphone technology which was basically more of a predictive and preventive digital health. I think what has happened today is that in the world of medicine and healthcare, if you have a non-invasive technology, I think that is even being embraced more by hospitals, because probably that becomes the first layer even to understand whether something is going right or wrong. And when this startup was in the business of using technology, when I say technology, obviously artificial intelligence, even to come up with some of the metrics, it was very, very gratifying to know that these guys are doing. So what were they exactly doing? This was a clinical grade application to capture the blood volume so that you can understand what is the changes that is happening in the capillary system. So it may sound a bit technical, but in a very simple way, the blood pressure was one of the reasons for them even to diagnose what is happening with the mind, with the organ, with the body, with the illness that they are disclosing, or even the lifestyle, because sometimes some of the diseases are more lifestyle, or even emotions. So just look at the broad gamut that I've just told you. I've not told you anything specific. I said it is much more holistic. Starts with the mind, goes to the organ, goes to the body, goes to the lifestyle, goes to the illness, and even the emotions. This is one startup where we got super excited, and obviously they needed support also in terms of guiding them, because one was the funding and the resource constraint that they had. When I say resource constraint, some of these healthcare businesses also are slightly capital intensive. I'll tell you why it is capital intensive. I think if you do not carry out multiple tests and ensure that every test is leading to higher accuracy, there won't be a greater chance for the hospitals to embrace these products. And therefore, there was a need for funding constraint, which we were able to overcome. The second was, in the big question, the market entry barrier itself. Because I spoke about devices, I spoke about diagnostic, that's a huge market, dominated by some established players. What did we do for that? We went with a partnership model. So for this, we ensured that we were able to partner with the bigger lads. So it became more complementary than competitive. So the strategic aspect that we took was partnership and collaboration rather than trying to compete, with these behemoths. The third area where we saw as an issue in this business was there was this operational hurdle in terms of GTM strategy. What is GTM? Is this going to be a B2B or a B2C? I think we clearly evolved saying that if you want to be a cutting edge technology, get the businesses first to approve your product. So we went the B2B way, and the only way you can go B2B way is through how effective you are able to show the efficacy of the product. That's what the whole story was. In a nutshell, this startup is so closer to my heart because of three reasons. One is the visionary leadership. The team was absolutely brilliant, not just the founders, but the second line of command. The second is they went on this partnership model, which is very closer to my heart, because I always say that instead of R&D, sometimes do C&D, connect and develop. So R&D is research and develop, but I always say connect and develop so that you're more complementary rather than being competitive. But third, this is so beautiful about this startup. Hetal, they used a very effective communication and storytelling strategy. These guys had the best way to communicate what they were doing in the market, telling them that I'm B2B, but trust me, where the C are going to get benefited out of this product. And I think the constant way of communicating created a potential impact in the market, and therefore they were able to secure funding and even a crowdfunding. I think for me, that was, one of the best way of even learning for myself that how a startup can look at storytelling as a medium, as a powerful way even to communicate how well, they stand out in the market. So I'm very close, to the startup, and thanks for asking that question because it makes me, relive those memories. Hetal, I'm not able to hear you.
No, I'm saying it's always good to know intricate details of a relationship and how a startup kind of stood out, and your whole concept of C&D will remain with me. I think it's a good one from a stickler perspective. It's been interesting to know a lot what you have experienced on the ground from your startups through your engagement journey and so on and so forth. Another huge source of wisdom is books. So would you like to cite a few books which are interesting from a startup ecosystem perspective or maybe from business perspective?
Hetal, I'll make this statement. I used to read books a lot before, probably in my younger age. But trust me, after that, I was not reading books, but I was reading snippets of them. Okay,
Okay.
I was more listening to the audio, listening to the YouTubes. And so let me share some of the snippets from the books
Sure.
that I would recommend. Okay, the
Yeah.
first book I want to recommend is a book called The Lean Startup.
Yeah.
This is by Eric Ries.
Always. Yeah.
And why Lean Startup is so important? I think the understanding of a minimum viable product is very, very important for a startup. I think what I want to tell them is that understand first what the customer wants. I always say that building great products or services begins with knowing the users. If you can't come up with your MVP, or let's say the alpha or the beta, or let's say a POC, how will you even understand what is the expectation of the customer? And I think Lean Startup, tells you that beautifully. And there is this very simple concept: build, measure, and once you have built and measured, ensure that you're able to learn out of it. So it's not just building and measure. Kitna learning ho raha hai? Are you a
Yeah.
fast learner? Can you bring about the changes into the product? So that's the first
Yeah.
book I would recommend, because I constantly read that book just to reiterate, philosophy into my system. The second is very interesting book. This is by Peter Thiel, called Zero to One, and it was very different, unbelievable when I read it for the first time. Because when I heard the concept, that you got to think differently, you got to aim for monopoly, I thought, what is he talking about, honestly? But when I dwelled into it, there's this beautiful message. The message is, can you focus on the fundamentals first? Because the fundamentals is what is going to get you from 0 to 1.
Yeah.
We always say that, no, when your foundation is strong, success is much more easier. I think that was the greater message I saw from this book. The third one I would recommend, I saw this more first as a YouTube rather than a book. It's called Start with the Why by Simon Sinek.
Yeah.
And in the video, what I really liked is the golden circle. For example, many, they first focus on the what, then they focus on the how, then they go to the why. But I think Simon Sinek so beautifully said, begin with the why. Why are you doing what are you doing? And why is so important. I think that's a great book. If I have to quote one more book, this is very closer to my heart, because I took a session also on this, because this book was absolutely amazing. It's called The Almanac of Naval Ravikant. This is not a book written by one person. This is the various speeches in the podcast, which Eric Jorgensen collected, and then he put together as a book. But I'll tell you why this book is so important. I think after some time, all of us believe in philosophy, believe in spirituality. And I think the idea of this book is to say that wealth is important. But I think more than wealth, I think the idea of the true wealth is beyond money. What the book says is that when we say beyond money, it's all about time, relationship, and personal freedom. I think all of us somewhere we forget the fact that we need our personal freedom, our personal, time. So this book not just spoke about the money part, but also said about how we can have a meaningful life, and therefore, that's the next one I would recommend.
Yeah. No, fantastic, and I'm proud to say that I've read all four of them. But a good collection and good summary of the books, and I'm sure that the choice of books reflects the depth of experience that you have, right? And of course, it's, the detailed answers that you gave also reflects the kind of experience, and more importantly, how much you're thinking, right? You're actually applying thought around what you're learning and trying to build up your knowledge repository based on what you're experiencing as well. For the last question, I'll flip the mic around. What's the question you have for me?
Interesting, Hetal. You spoke somewhere about saying that in today's world, I think it's very important to embrace corporate governance. And I use a phrase, saying that if you torture data long enough, it can confess to anything, which means data is power. You can convert data into information, into meaningful information, as slice and dice, the information. The question I have to you is, you have gained, a lot of this, snippets, from interactions with various entrepreneurs, with various, startups. The question is, because you run a podcast, how, you have ensured that, all this that, you are sort of assimilating is shaping, into messages, via your podcast.
Very interesting. So I think what I believe is that knowledge is infinite. I always believe, I always have that hunger mindset where I am not willing to sit on the laurels of what I have gained, but to look forward to what I can gain in the future. So from that perspective, I try to keep a very open mind, aspects or facets which I have deep down knowledge on. I act very
Beautiful.
lame and stupid in these conversations, so that I'm not allowing my own personal information to as a bias, so that I'm open for more and more inputs. And I think that's the way I would want the listeners and the incubatees and the startups to also look at. Just because you have a successful startup doesn't mean that you are a know-it-all. There might still be something more which you might need to know. And as long as you keep yourself open for feedback, suggestions, contempts, criticisms, abuses, and praise, you will make sure that you will progress in life. The day you say, boss, I know enough of this, the journey for knowledge will stop there, and you'll probably become redundant very soon after that. So that's my learning here.
No, absolutely great, Hetal, because you remind me of Steve Jobs. He always says, stay hungry, stay foolish. Okay, which is very, very
Of course.
important. And second,
Yeah.
because you're saying there's something, is getting reminded, there's a beautiful phrase which says learn, unlearn, and relearn. Because sometimes,
Yeah.
what we have learned could become our enemy because it can blindfold
Yeah.
us. Only when we
Of course.
unlearn and try to relearn, probably we are
Yeah.
getting the better version of ourselves. Probably we can unleash our potential then.
Yeah.
So beautiful.
Yeah. And the beauty of this quote is you can't stop at either one of them, right? You can't learn
Exactly.
and not unlearn. You can't unlearn and not relearn.
Very true.
Because you just unlearn and then do what? I mean, you obviously need to get to the
Exactly.
next stage as well. You can't get stunted there as well. So very neatly summarized. I think that's a perfect way to end a extremely beautiful and informative conversation. It was a pleasure
Thank you.
talking to you, and I imagine if 40 minutes can get us so much knowledge, imagine what 40 hours or 400 hours of interaction with our incubators will get you. So look forward to a much more deep-rooted engagement between you and our incubators. Thanks a lot.